on till 8 o'clock to listen to me talking about choosing anti-diabetic agents for best CV outcome. These are my disclosures. So diabetes and heart disease is something that we have known about all the time. But recently, due to various publications, we have come to be familiar with a topic called pipes and pumps. Atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, which is basically a formation of plaques inside the arteries which need to rupture and lead to myocardial infarctions and myocardial ischemia, is the premise that we have always looked at when we have thought about atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, and this is disease of the pipes. This in turn leads to myocardial scarring. Scarring of the myocardium leads to failure of the pump, which is heart failure, and this is disease of the pumps, and this may exist with atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, but it may also exist without cardiovascular disease, where there is hypertrophy, fibrosis, and stiffness of the cardiac wall, leading to heart failure. And all these coincides and gets together to lead to one drastic endpoint in diabetes, which is death. And this is seen in diabetes all through, because with improvement of treatment from, say, the 1990s to 2020, one thing which has not changed in diabetes is the huge gradient of death between non-diabetics and diabetics, where if you look at all-cause mortality. And this all-cause mortality in being higher than non-diabetics is driven almost entirely by cardiovascular death. Now, what does it mean, this increase in cardiovascular death? What does it mean in numerical terms to your patient? And if you look at a patient with a lifespan of 60 years, if the patient has diabetes, the heart disease death is increased by about 10%, reducing 6 years of the patient's life. And indeed, if the patient has had a myocardial infarction or a stroke, which is atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, you find that there is actually a 20% reduction of the patient's lifespan, because at that point of time, 12 years is cut off from his lifespan because of the existence of diabetes with atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, defined as a combination of myocardial infarction and stroke. It is not only myocardial infarction and stroke. We find that whether you have a preserved ejection fraction or whether you have a reduced ejection fraction, cardiovascular death and all-cause mortality is increased in patients with diabetes. Not only that, even if you've had a myocardial infarction, your prognosis and chances of death is far higher if you've got diabetes. Not surprisingly, therefore, there has been a consistent interest in type 2 diabetes and heart, but never was there a need for CVOTs till the publication of the rosiglitazone fiasco. As we all know, rosiglitazone was a very powerful anti-diabetic drug, but the publication of the RECORD study and the meta-analysis thereafter by Steve Nissen confirmed that rosiglitazone leads to an increased risk of non-fatal myocardial infarction as well as fatal myocardial infarction. And this, in turn, prompted the FDA to come up with this document, which was a guidance for industry, that if you have a new drug, you will have to come up with a cardiovascular outcome trial to prove that your drug is safe in patients with diabetes. And if not safe, one thing you will have to show is that it is superior in patients with diabetes. So this started the realm of cardiovascular outcome trials with diabetic patients. And this is the CVOT timeline. You've all seen this slide before. It was done with gliptins, it was done with SGLT2 inhibitors and GLP-1 receptor analogs. No need to go into detail of this. I will give you a summary of the initial studies which were done with DPP-4 inhibitors, and all of the studies, including sitagliptin, saxagliptin, alogliptin, and linagliptin, showed that all these drugs are safe, as well as the studies with exendin-based GLP-1 receptor analogs, which include lixisenatide and exasenatide long-acting, which also showed and confirmed the safety of these drugs in type 2 diabetes as far as cardiovascular outcomes is concerned. It also showed that degludec and insulin glargine U100 are safe in type 2 diabetes, but did not show any kind of positive results. The first positive signals started coming out when we did the EMPEREDGE outcomes trial, and this showed an improvement in MACE, which was driven by a reduction of death from cardiovascular disease, which started to come out as early as 6 months. This was driven entirely by a reduction of hospitalization for heart failure. But the main problem with sodium glucose transporters is that it does reduce cardiovascular death with heart failure, but in itself it does not work on the atherosclerotic mechanism, which is myocardial infarction and stroke. What it does show is that this is entirely driven by heart failure, so it works on the pump, but leaves aside the atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, and indeed it does a wonderful job on the pump because it reduces the composite of cardiovascular death or hospitalization for heart failure. You can see that the orange diamond is well on the left-hand side of UNITY, confirming that there is a reduction of heart failure and CV death or hospitalization for heart failure. In this setting, the publication of the leader was like manna from heaven for diabetologists because for the first time, we had a drug which reduced the risk of heart disease death in patients with diabetes, and this to the reduction of MACE. For the first time, we could say that we had a drug which reduced death. Ladies and gentlemen, death is a huge thing. There is nothing bigger than death. And today, for the first time, we have a drug which makes us look the cardiologists in the eye and say, yes, we diabetologists too can save lives with one drug which reduces death. And liraglutide provided that as in our armamentarium in the treatment of diabetes, making the regulatory authorities change these things and add that liraglutide should be used to reduce the risk of MACE and cardiovascular disease in patients with established heart disease. Now, the meta-analysis conducted on the effect of this on MI, stroke, and a combination of MI and stroke, which I had earlier shown you, reduces lifespan of a patient by about up to 20%, showed that there was a reduction in usage of GLP-1 receptor analogs in patients who had established cardiovascular disease, and this was a huge change in the treatment of diabetes. The conclusion from this study showed there is a reduction in total of stroke and MI, and if you left aside the ELIXIR trial, it seemed to be showing a reduction of death, which would make us think that GLP-1 RA-based analogs are good at reducing cardiovascular death and atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, not so the exendin-based disease, which also confirmed that there is a reduction of heart failure with GLP-1 RA, but not in a reduction of hospitalization for heart failure. So finally, we come to the situation where we can differentiate that for disease of the pumps, which is heart failure, the drug to use is SGLT2 inhibitors. And if you have atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, which can in turn lead to heart failure, the drug to use is GLP-1 receptor analogs. And this was clearly portrayed by the ADA-ESD algorithm, which shows that if you have atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, the first line would be a GLP-1 receptor analog, unless you had some other reason to use a SGLT2 inhibitor. Again, the same situation with heart failure. If you used, the first line would be SGLT2 inhibitor, but the GLP-1 could be used interchangeably with that. But then there was a lot of questions asked. These trials had been done in patients with established cardiovascular disease. These were all sick patients who had had myocardial infarctions or had a stroke or had established heart disease. What about the 68% of patients who come to our clinic who do not have heart disease? And this was highlighted by the ADA-ESD consensus report and said that, do we really need to give it to this? It is in this setting that the REWIND trial was published, which showed that there was a 70% people who did not have prior cardiovascular disease, who had a normal HbA1c almost and had a longer duration of diabetes. So diabetes was not in itself playing any role, or diabetes control was not playing any role in the treatment of this condition. And this showed a reduction of MACE, which was statistically significant with dulaglutide, and this was driven by a reduction of non-fatal stroke. Not only that, we came to know from the REWIND trial that this data was consistent in patients who had established cardiovascular disease and also in patients who did not have established cardiovascular disease, showing us that this would be a very effective drug in patients for primary prevention. A meta-analysis conducted thereafter, which took into consideration all the GLP-1 receptor analog studies till date, showed a statistically highly significant reduction of MI and stroke, as well as reduction of CV death and 3P MACE. Not surprisingly, when the ESC came up with their algorithm, they put their foot in it and said, now, no more metformin. If you have somebody with either established cardiovascular disease, or if you have somebody with a high risk or a very high risk of cardiovascular disease, you must put the patient onto a SGLT2 inhibitor or a GLP-1 receptor analog as a first-line therapy. But with GLP-1 receptor analog, and then there was a war. All the drugs have data, and as you can see, dulaglutide, Trulicity from Lilly shows a 12% MACE reduction. Victoza or liraglutide shows a 13% reduction. The two semaglutide, the injectable and the oral semaglutide, show around a 25% MACE reduction. So it's really a Hobson's choice because all of them are showing a huge reduction. But what we have to take into consideration, and I think this is the most important bit that we take into consideration when we decide, make a clinical judgment, is the NNT. How many patients do you need to treat to get one benefit? And if you look at the NNT, all the trials which have shown reduction of MACE or cardiovascular outcomes, including EMPA-REG, LEADER, HARMONY, and SUSTAIN, the NNT is roughly about 50. And if you look at the primary prevention trials, there's no primary prevention trial that has taken with anti-diabetics, so I chose to look at the JUPITER and the AFCAPS Texas, which is with the statins. Around 50 is the mark, that is the number to treat. But when you look at the dulaglutide trial with REWIND, the data was not that consistent with a much higher number needed to treat at 72, which is why the American College of Cardiologists concluded with a number of needed to, of 72, and this data being generated outside the United States, the Americans felt that this should not be leading to a change in protocol. And again, if you look at the definition of high risk and very high risk and moderate risk, I would challenge you, ladies and gentlemen, to think back on your patients and find very few patients I think you would find who have moderate risk. Can you think of any of your patients who do not have diabetes, hypertension, and dyslipidemia, or they smoke or are obese? Can you think of patients with 10 years of diabetes without any other additional risk factor like hypertension, dyslipidemia, or smoking or obesity? I think you would find such patients very difficult to find in your day-to-day clinic. So almost everybody that you would be seeing would be falling into the high risk or the very high risk, making the ESC come up with this kind of a consideration that if you have to use a GLP-1 receptor analog, you have to choose liraglutide as a first line because it reduces death. None of the other GLP-1 receptor analogs have reduced death, and that is why if you look at their timeline as to which drugs you should be using, it is liraglutide, followed by semaglutide, followed by dulaglutide. All drugs are good, but only liraglutide reduces death. And which is why when I picked up this slide, I thought the best option would be liraglutide in secondary prevention in patients with atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease or at high risk or at very high risk of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, which I think you will find comprises 95% of your patients. In patients who do not have this, probably the best data exists with dulaglutide. So to summarize, diabetes is a major risk factor for heart disease, and this can be in the form of two things: atherosclerotic or heart failure. It reduces myocardial infarction and stroke, and a combination of both. But primarily, I think the most important thing to remember is liraglutide reduces cardiovascular death. The ideal treatment to treat both the pipes and pumps, you would agree, ladies and gentlemen, would be GLP-1 receptor analogs and SGLT2 combination, which would be best suited for your patients with diabetes who have such a high cardiovascular risk. Thank you very much.